Welcome to the RKD Group Thinkers podcast, the podcast for nonprofit marketers. This is a show about the people who influence nonprofit marketing and fundraising. Be hard pressed, Ronnie, to find a bigger influence at the moment than our guest today. It's also full circle for us in a couple of ways. One, we complete the circle of having the second half of a dynamic duo. And then we also get to add a couple of circles, a couple of zeros on the end of the podcast as we celebrate today our 100th episode. And so, cue the sounders of, I don't know, confetti or poppers or I
Fireworks.
don't know. Yeah, fireworks. Yeah, cue all those things. Like, Ronnie, like 100 episodes. That's that's pretty dang cool.
It's something, isn't it? Like who would have thought, right? That we get here
We
where we are.
we've convinced 100 people to talk to us, and that is
What what were they thinking?
what were they thinking? What were they thinking? But it's awesome, and it's like we've the show has taken some nuances in different states along the way. You know, Ronnie, there was a moment in our in during the pandemic when we were really talking about the pandemic's impact in the moment on fundraising and how people think about it and the pivots and things that were being done, and it's now turned into much more of a reflection of the beauty of the people in the space. And so, tell us a little bit about our 100th episode guest and that type of conversation.
Yeah, it's funny. We didn't. There was no like super intention about picking our guest here to be the 100th guest, but it's so perfect. Like you said, Jon McCoy, the co-founder, CEO, podcast host of We Are for Good, is such a fitting guest when you talk about people and connection and everything they're doing there at We Are for Good. It's also kind of funny that we were looking at recording this at one point and it was going to be on July 4th and 100th episode. It all kind of worked out, but we couldn't get schedules aligned. And now it's going to be on July 11th, which in a way works out in itself because John and Becky are hosting Impact Uprising, the first big event that they have. And we'll unpack that a little bit in the show. But that event and several of the things we talked about with John, to me, like there's this continuing thread of him taking a leap and trying something new and going into that uncertain area that oh, is this going to work? I don't know, but let's give it a shot. And I loved hearing that in the way he was talking about some of the reflections on his path to where he is now.
Yeah, yeah. Folks don't realize whenever they enter into this space with us that we will ultimately see a thread that they may not anticipate. And I love that. I love that for us. I love that for our listeners. I love that for our guests after the fact. And it makes me think of there's a 90s country song that had a lyric something like you got to stand for something or you fall for anything. And that's a quip that sounds like it's straight out of uh, my dad's West Texas mouth. And but there's something powerful about that idea of like standing for something and what that means in terms of what you put out and how that truly matters, certainly in the space that we work, whether or not you're in a nonprofit or a part of a group that supports nonprofits, or you're someone that gives to nonprofits. And so listen through this journey and John's journey for the importance of values and how values turn into decisions, and then how those decisions carve paths that maybe we weren't anticipating in a really, really good way. And so it's awesome. It's a fun episode. It's a great way to celebrate 100. And so with that, here's Jon McCoy of We're for Good on the Thinkers podcast. All right, so this is a milestone for us, and so when Ronnie and I talked about how do we cross this milestone? Like when we go through this checkpoint, what do we want that to look like and feel like? And we both were like, boom, Jon McCoy.
Oh my gosh.
That we want Jon to be a part of our crossing through this milestone of 100 episodes of the Thinkers podcast. And so, here's one of the reasons, Jon, is because you've crossed a similar milestone,
Mm.
and and you're the hare and we're the tortoise in some ways, but it doesn't matter because we both got to the end.
Okay, I mean, y'all, I'm having imposter syndrome, but thank you. That's so kind that y'all open up this door. I feel a kinship to what you're doing that I think we both just love getting to know people's stories and getting to like slow down time for a second, pull up the coffee, pull up the chairs. And I'm proud of y'all. Like I was joking before we started that this stat like came into my world that most podcasters don't make it past episode 3. So y'all being at episode 100 shows a massive commitment to this. I feel the pain, I feel the sweat, but also the joy that comes in that. So thank you for welcoming.
Yeah.
It's an honor to be here with y'all. Yeah.
That's we love that stat. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, thank you. Okay, so y'all have crossed, we forget, y'all have crossed 550 recently. And so where I want to start our conversation about like your path, your journey is like reflect on 550 conversations and what has that taught you that you weren't expecting, and what has that like revealed for and or in you, like just kind of process for us 550 conversations through We Are For Good.
I mean, thank you for that question. Wow, it's changed me like on every level and every fiber of my person like has been changed, because I don't think you can sit across from people and earnestly like want to hear their story and not be changed over time, to realize everybody has something deeply significant to offer and everybody has immense value in the world. And I think that we spend so much more of our time talking and moving through our to-do list and a lot less time sitting and actually hearing what the person across from us, whether that's your partner or your kids or like the person that you're interviewing, like they're actually saying between their words. And it is a gift, you know, it's a massive gift that it's been 500 plus conversations. And I look back and I'm in a very reflective space right now. So y'all are getting this from me, not only because I'm kind of coming out of some sickness, but it just fresh back from the Plenty retreat. I know you've had Jeff and Jen of Plenty on the podcast. And so we just did the Lantern retreat as a team, which is kind of a unique experience, but a lot of it's introspection. A lot of it's understanding our purpose and our light and our, you know, what really wakes us up and gets us engaged in life. And, it comes down to like a lot of the things that the podcast allows us to do. To get to see the light in other people's story is like one of my core things. Like I love making that connection. And so that's become very clear through the conversations of like, how do we help each other find that? What's that unique thing that each of us bring to the table so we can just like pour the heck into it, you know, and then realize we don't have everything. So we need each other also. So I think both of those things are very true of like how little I know, how little I understand, and how much I need a lot of people around me in life to fill in those gaps. So that's something that I've definitely taken away. And then like, I mean, bias is like such a thing. Like we all have them, you know, and I'm also on a family road trip across the US. Right. And I've realized like we've had a lot of bias of like, oh, there's nothing to see there. And then we get taken away, you know, by a place that like catches your heart and you're like, oh my gosh, every place has something unique. And I think it's the same thing as like, we sometimes make up our mind of like what somebody maybe is about or what they may have to say. And then really sitting down and spending an hour with somebody, everybody has something for you to offer, you know? And so I just think breaking that down has been really healthy for me as a person to open my mind to what's out there, you know?
To your point about like a gift, what a gift for us to all get to experience these things and then share them out with folks. Just, you know, the conversations, learning people's stories, getting to amplify people's stories. You know, we have some folks on our team that they'll talk to Ronnie or I about like hey, I was listening and I heard this, that, or the other, or, you know, go back and start from the beginning. Like it's a training manual on understanding the industry. Like it's those sorts of things to where in the moment, a lot of times when you're on the journey, you don't realize the import of the journey. And so
Mm,
to your point about like the introspection side and the opportunity to get to stoke those things, like how
yeah,
cool is it that we get to do these things because not everyone does, and not everyone has the
yeah,
resources or the availability or. And so, yeah, something
yeah.
to not take for granted.
No. And so that's truly why I'm like, thank y'all for doing this, because y'all hold space for people. And, I believe with podcasting too, that with everything, like there's never an audience that's too small or a people group. Like I think wherever you can create a table, like you're going to have a space for somebody that's been missed before that can pull up a chair. And so like it's a commitment to y'all to turn out 100 meaningful episodes and conversations. And I know it's not light, but I know you've built community around that and people
Yeah.
feel more seen as a result. So truly thank you for doing
Oh,
that and for bringing me in at this point. Like I'm totally your hype squad over here too. Like y'all are doing it.
All right, John, are you ready for our
Oh,
listeners to pull up a chair to your
I'm
table? Are
ready.
you
Come
ready?
on.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So let's walk back. Let's go back through some of your career. And
Sure.
you grew up in Oklahoma, correct?
Yeah.
Went to
Just up
Oklahoma
the road from
State.
y'all. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
yeah.
So I was looking through some of your background, and one of the ones that stood out to me was you started working for Oklahoma State University's foundation, and then you left to take a leave of absence to go to
Yeah.
Thailand. Like that's a
Truth.
big jump. So what can you walk
Yeah.
us through how that came about and how you went from all in Oklahoma to go to Thailand? How did you do that?
Yeah. Thank you. And I feel like you're like these investigators digging through. I love that you found this part of our story. Like
Yes.
it's
I
definitely
was a
shaped who I
journalist in a
am.
former life.
I know. Yes. And you're like, where's his sports references? Oh, he can play no sports. Okay, still, this is you're digging further and further. So let me give a little like context before we left for Thailand. So I had met my wife in college at Oklahoma State University, and we both, during that time, had had short term experience going to Thailand. And for kind of random reasons, we both fell in love with this country and unrelated to each other, which was just kind of this weird thing that we both had in common, but it bound us together. And so I had graduated with a graphic design degree at OSU. I'm literally walking through the art building, right? And I see this flyer. All my friends are going to agencies in New York and Austin, all these cool places to go work for big brands. And I was just like, oh, I want to do something connected more to like mission and purpose and whatnot. Not that I didn't love the brand stuff, but this flyer said Oklahoma State University Foundation looking for a design intern, and I was like, that could be me. And at a minimum, I could go help whoever made this make a better flyer because they're never going to get an artist to come work for them with this flyer that they've got. It was so ugly. So anyway, I ended up going to this interview, and there's Becky Endicott. So like connecting our two sides of the story, that's where I first met my business partner and friend for the last 20 years, Becky, who we've co-founded We Are for Good together. But that's an important part because at the time that I got that job, which I guess spoiler alert, I got the job, turned into, their graphic artist, and then some people had kind of like left, and so it put me in a leadership role. And the school was going through this transformation, and they were on the precipice of launching $1 billion fundraising campaign. You might remember this. Well, the agency had been fired, and they're like, we're going to build this internally, which is kind of like a through line of my story. And I'm like, I'm not qualified for this. Have never done really any kind of big project like this. Becky's writing, I'm the designer, and we're like pouring into this campaign. And personally, at the same time, my wife graduated college. And so she was going to be an English teacher, all the things. But these short-term experiences we had been to Thailand kind of came back to us, and they were connected through a campus ministry that we were involved in, and they came to us and they're like, hey, we'd love for y'all to consider doing a short-term trip. And I'm like, I've got a job that I love. We have this campaign that's coming, and Candace is getting her student teaching and all this stuff going, but it like definitely made sense with at the same time, like it's something we both felt really called and passionate to do. And so it kind of freaked me out because I was like, how are we going to raise the money? We're like broke, right out of school, all of these kind of factors. I had a job that I love. And it came down to this decision of like, if we go, it'd be for a year, but we had to raise our own support, you know? And so I was like, I think we should do this. So what I did, and I had to like psych myself up, which is another through line in my journey. I have to psych myself up, and I'm like, I got to go talk to Becky because she's going to be like, dude, I just hired you. Like, what are you doing? But I remember walking into her office and I said, hey, Becky, listen, I love this place. It's been an incredible opportunity. I realize I'm just getting started here, but we really feel called to go do this year-long ministry overseas. I don't know if I'll come back, but right now it's a year commitment. I just need to be really honest, but I have to raise support. I just wanted to be really open with you because I don't know if it's going to come in, but I just didn't want to do that without telling you. And truly, with like tears in her eyes, y'all know Becky well, she said, as your boss, I'm so sad. As your friend, I want to write the first check for you to go. And she literally pulls out her checkbook and she writes me a check and slides it across the desk.
It's the most Becky thing that Becky can do.
It's like the most Becky thing, right? And so that began what was probably 6 weeks where $80,000 came in the door from just people we knew, people we didn't know, confirming, okay, we're going to go. So we went, and it was a transformational experience. You know, I mean, we got to live among Thai people in a part of a Thai campus ministry. So we're teaching English and we're getting to know people in Thailand and traveling all throughout Southeast Asia for a year and being part of that. And so it doesn't not change you as a person living overseas and realizing the world's a huge place and there's so many things I don't understand and so many storylines that I want to be part of. So it really did shape us. We loved our experience, but it was like something we knew we didn't want to do for the rest of our life at that point. And so a year later, I mean, I'd stayed in touch with the team and I was like, hey, you know, a few months back, I'm like, hey, I think we're going to come back. I don't know if there's a job for me. And Becky's like, there's definitely a job for you, you know, because this campaign's at force. So it was like kind of this like moment in time that we stepped out of normal day-to-day life of trying to start to build our careers at that point to go chase this other piece. And it was like a deeply moving spiritual and like challenging personal experience, you know, to go do, but came back and kind of the rest is history from there.
Okay, so there's some seeds that I want to see if they sprouted from this.
Okay.
One, did Becky create the ugly flyer?
That is such a good question that I don't know the answer to. It was in Times New Roman. It was clearly created in Word. Like, okay. It was not designed.
All right.
Probably. Let's ask.
All right. Listen, yeah. I mean, like, we'll verify. We'll verify.
Okay, we're gonna verify. This will be in your show notes.
We're gonna. Yeah, this will be the show notes. Okay. Second and more important seed.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you and your wife are on this cross country road trip with the fam. You've got all of the little McCoy kiddos, and y'all are traversing, like y'all are hitting all the nooks and crannies across the country. How did that experience of answering that call and y'all doing that together, how did that factor into when you had this other opportunity or idea about let's leave the normalcy of our home surroundings and let's do this kind of once in a lifetime thing, and taking our kids and exploring the US?
Thanks, man. This is why I love you guys. Like it is all like connected, you know? And again, like having Jeff and Jen in my head, like we have one life, you know, we don't have a personal life and we have a work life. We have one life. And it is all really connected. Candace and I, my wife, were born or not born in Oklahoma, but lived here for most of our life. And so a couple of things, since we didn't go overseas until college, I knew that I wanted a different experience for our kids, you know? And so from early on, and just even when we were talking about before we're having kids, we knew we wanted to just like have a different worldview and have a broader worldview than what we necessarily grew up. Not that there was anything wrong with how we grew up, but it was a different way. And so we wanted that to be a bedrock of our family. Along the way, that took a lot of different shapes, you know? So it's like when we wanted to like do that, when I was still working full time, I would just save up my vacation and be like, how can we go for like a couple of weeks on a more, bigger trip. Then the pandemic happened though, and like everything changed, right? And We Are for Good came into the picture, and a lot of decisions had been made along the way of like, we want to get to a place where we could have more freedom for travel and for exploration and just for kind of openness of what life could bring. And so some of those big decisions were, deciding to keep homeschooling post pandemic life, which was a big change. And shout out to my wife, the educator that loves education, that loves pouring into different ways of teaching and ways that kids are learning, because it wouldn't work, without her passion and her love of doing that. But then also to the kids that were really open, and I think because we did travel, or we would go into the Asian supermarket on a random Saturday when we're in Oklahoma City to just like disrupt and interrupt just the normal flow of life. And so everybody felt really ready when we kind of threw out this crazy idea, because as we had kind of unlocked along the way, okay, the kids are homeschooled, I now work remotely, I could work from anywhere. And man, I'm so bad at home maintenance. Let's be completely honest. It's like so hard for me to like fix things and keep them unbroken around the house. And I was like, this is kind of our escape hatch to go see more of the world, to do it together, to have like a goal together as a family was really alluring to me too. So we actually sat down and pinned out some family values, and like, we're like, what are some of the things that we want to be true of our family? And like, of course I put them into a deck because I'm like kind of a dork. And we talked about it as a family, and we're like, how do we like, how does this land with everybody? How do you feel about this? And I mean, some of them are like exploration and friendships and adventure and things that all the kids could like identify with, and things that we love. But it's like, what do it look like to go experience that on a bigger scale? And so, wrapped a brand around it, wrapped an idea around it. And it's like, let's do 50 states, 50 national parks in 500 days. And that's what we're on, we're letting go of the 500 days though, because moving too fast is not in vogue. Moving slow is the way to go. So I'm like, however long it takes us, I'm okay with that. It doesn't have to be a set time. So lots of things to unpack probably, but that's kind of a loose framework of where we're headed.
Which font did you use in your deck?
I love it. Oh my gosh, put me on the spot. Oh, it's called Gopher. Gopher. Okay. Gopher. Is it the only way to spell gopher?
Yeah. 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 What does your family's exposure to your work like tie those things together? I mean, look, Ronnie and I both work remote.
Yeah.
We spend time together in office sometimes, but like generally speaking, there is even a veneer in the doors that are on the other side of where I'm looking right now, and there is this like, sometimes the kids come in, but sometimes they come out. You're in an Airstream, and the fam is there. Like,
Yeah.
what is their exposure? What does that mean or foster in terms of your family conversations to how they process what they see dad do?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. They one think dad is a freak about Starlink. They're like, if dad's Starlink is not working, dad is very stressed. Because I feel as an Enneagram 9, if anybody listening will relate, Enneagram 9 is the peacemaker. You don't want to create disruption for people around you, right? You want the things to coexist well. So like, I don't want to be a drain on the team that we created, because that was one of my first things, is like, we want to do this, but I don't want to interrupt other people just because we decided to live in a really traditional way. So that's one thing. But I mean, the kids love We Are for Good. They feel like they're definitely like part of it. They love wearing the shirt and love feeling like, they're part of kind of that thing that's been created. So it's always just been part of our story, especially since they were still really young when it started. I think just like an example of something that's just kind of interesting is, we're working with you guys collectively in Giving Tuesday, which is like such a dream partnership. Can I just go ahead and say, because Giving Tuesday cool. To us is just like, I don't know, starry eyes. Like, this is like such a global generosity movement, And I remember the day that I told my daughter Viv, I was like, hey, guess what? We're working with Giving Tuesday. And she's like, you're working with my favorite holiday? I was like, A, you think it's a holiday, and B, it's true, like her favorite holiday. Like, she's such like a generous old soul type person that it's like, it's the day she looks forward to every year to just like figure out what organization she wants to support. And then she gets all the mail to follow and stuff like that addressed to Viv, which is really fun. But the that's just like an example. I think it's somewhat like normal because it's such a flow, it's like it's just part of our life that we move from having these deep conversations, and then maybe I share some of it at dinner, but I don't know, it's just, I guess, normal for them now.
John, I'm
I think
curious,
Sorry,
backing
I
up a
think
little
everybody
bit
froze.
to the starting of We Are for Good.
Yeah.
How did you've been a health foundation for 9 or 10 years?
Yeah.
How did the formation of We Are for Good and connecting with Becky on that? How did that get started?
Sure.
What were those conversations like, and what was the vision at that time compared
Okay.
to where you are
yeah, who
now?
took the first step, and then how did
Yeah,
that we've heard Becky's side of it. So like
Oh, I need
now
to
we have
go
a
listen
different
to what Becky
witness.
said. Hopefully these stories corroborate, if you lay them side by side. So, the years that we went to the healthcare foundation, just to give a little bit of context, like Oklahoma State was so successful, right? They're in the $1 billion campaign. Boone Pickens was in his like massive legacy giving part of his life, right? So there was hundreds of millions of dollars being raised. And we had a friend that went to Oklahoma City that he said, this foundation needs a lot of rebuilding and a lot of effort. And it seemed alluring to say, hey, go be part of something that's just trying to start and figure it out. So, not a month into working at this new foundation in the city, Garth Brooks was publicly suing the hospital over naming rights of something that he made a gift and the hospital hadn't honored it and all this stuff. So, within like a matter of like weeks, we went from like the celebrated foundation to the one being drugged through the national media cycle. And there's some definitive points in there. I remember going to Becky's office of like, what do we do? Like, how do you fundraise when the world's largest country music star is suing your hospital? Like, how do you look at people in the eye and say, you really should invest here and trust us? And at the same time, we were being invited to start an employee campaign, which again is like, is this the best time to ask our employees? I don't know. But Becky and I, the reason we connected, obviously we saw the world a lot of the same ways. We love marketing, and we call ourselves marketers disguised as fundraisers because that's what it felt like we were. Like, we're pretending to be fundraisers, but we just know how to do all the marketing stuff. But all of that points to like movement building. Like, we never wanted to just create like a fund a thing. We wanted to get people excited about the thing and feel like they're part of the thing and all that. So when we had this opportunity with the employee campaign, this was really central because this was 10 years ago, but this was planting the first seeds for We Are for Good. We're sitting there and we're like, if you're starting from scratch, how do you start something? And we called a lot of the hospitals, and a lot of them were doing casino royales and they're doing like movie nights to raise money. And it was very boring and like disconnected. And it's like, we knew like the stories we're part of were so good and so deep. It's like people were getting fertility treatment and having babies. That's part of my story. You're having people that are like, their life was saved from a stroke. It's like they have years with their uncle as a result of that. And it's like, and we're using a casino night as like our way to connect with people. And so it's just like felt like a disconnect of an opportunity. So we're like, what if we really centered on storytelling? What if we centered on like building a community? What if we centered on belief and not giving, but like you're part of this thing? And so some of those like core tenets to this employee campaign became the bedrock now for We Are for Good, like many years later. But what we saw when we kind of implemented this campaign around that passion and storytelling and the stuff that y'all are so good at RKD, let me just be very abundantly clear about getting people around a movement. That's what stuck. And so like we took this employee campaign from 300 people to 3,000 people over just a couple of years. And that became like recurring revenue and growing revenue and people that believed and didn't just transactionally give. So it was like raising almost $1 million a year as a campaign. So by year 7 or 8 of doing this, maybe 6 or 7, we're, have the opportunity to present. So we're going to AFP, we're going to AHP, we're going to all of the associations and sharing our story. And from that, as you start to talk about, hey, I think like your playbook is all wrong. Like, hey, start with these kind of values. Don't start with these cheesy tactics. Maybe you end up with some of the cheesy tactics. I love cheese, whatever. But like start with the core value of what you're trying to drive, and then you're going to get a different result. So from those conversations, we started to get people pinging us to say, hey, would you help us do this for our employees? And I'm like, Becky over here. Like, this is definitely not Becky because she was not in the entrepreneur path. I was like, Becky, I think we could build a consultancy. I was like, nobody cares about employee giving. Let's be clear. Like, I feel like most people, it's like an afterthought. I was like, we love this stuff. We have so much fun with it. We think that we have a point of view. It was like, people want to hire us to do it. So first We Are for Good, I mean, it was registered in maybe 2016 or something. And it was going to be an employee giving consultancy, which is hilarious, right? Now in retrospect. So we had started to get these couple of clients that were lined up. We had built an online masterclass, and we were doing all the things like, you're going to teach this course, you're going to have a lot of course members, it's going to turn into clients, this kind of model. And we had lunch at City Bites, and it's like the defining lunch of our We Are for Good relationship. I remember sitting in the exact booth we're at, and Becky's like, Jon, why are we building this company that's going to literally take us away from our families all the time? And I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. I mean, because consulting pre-COVID was like always travel, it felt like, it was like you're always going to be on site, and healthcare loves that kind of stuff, like to be on site, to be in our khakis, walking around campus and doing all the things. And I was like, you're so right. Like, this is I think it would work, but I think it's not the life we want. And I said, give me 2 weeks. And simultaneously, I had been listening, I would say binging Entrepreneurs on Fire, which is a podcast that I really enjoyed. John Lee Dumas, got to give him a lot of credit. He was in my head. He would always interview, interesting people that were doing entrepreneurial things, but I was interested in his story. And his whole dynamic was that he was a commercial real estate guy, and he was driving to work one day on his commute, and he was like, there should be like a short show interviewing entrepreneurs every day. And he's like, maybe I should be the one to create that, and it's like he started a daily show that was ridiculous that you could do that daily, but he just started creating content, and it turned into like one of the biggest entrepreneur podcasts, and it's turned into, he's real open with his income statements and like how he makes money and all these things. And so I came back to Becky and I was like, look, we love nonprofit work. We love this. Like, we can talk to people. We love storytelling. I was like, there's so many people's stories that we want to tell. We could do this. It could be the daily, nonprofit show. And Becky's like, you're crazy that it's going to be daily. It can't be daily, which I'm glad they talked me out of that. But we, had landed on like, let's do 3 a week. Let's turn these opportunities that were clients into, this way that we could support ourselves revenue wise. But instead of like teaching one organization, hey, here's the values to embed, what if we embedded the values into like everything we talk about in this ecosystem and bring it back to everyone matters, community is everything, belief over donors, all these sorts of things. And it gave us like a new platform to build off, and it just like clicked. And I don't think, you never know how things are going to go, but you have a gut that you're like, I think we can do this. Like, I know nothing about podcasting. I know nothing about people outside of Oklahoma, honestly, barely at this point in my life. But I'm like, I think this will work. And it's like, we're at least going to try. And so that was kind of the beginning, and we knew we couldn't do it just the two of us. So since we had some consulting work lined up, we're like, we got to bring somebody into this. And Julie Confer was on my team at the foundation doing stewardship. And I had seen how she took this really bad video that we had created, and she was like, hey, I think if we reworked these things, it would be stronger. And I said, Becky, a few weeks ago, Julie did this thing. And I was like, I think she could produce. Like, I just have like, she's got the innate talent to like take clips and make it more compelling. And so I called Julie into the office one day, and she's like, hey, so Becky and I are going to leave. Okay. But we want you to come with us. And Julie's like, should I shut the door? And I was like, maybe. But that was kind of the beginnings, to say this is going to be the team. But it wasn't an easy jump. And I feel like I want to tell this because I don't know who's listening, because you can have all these ideas. You even have friends around you. You have some confirmation bias that this is going to be the thing. But right before we made the decision to go, the pandemic happened, right? And that changed everything, or it seemingly changed everything. But, a year later, you realize, man, people were more confused than ever. They needed a podcast. They needed people. They needed their community more than ever. So that was one thing. But secondly was I had a couple of job offers open up right after that. And it would have been like the easy path of like, just go do this other thing, make more money, have more security in quotation marks, or like start this thing. And coming back to Candace, who is the dreamer, is such a dreamer in our life too, took me by the shoulders and was like, Jon, when are you going to quit giving up on your dream? Like, we got to do this. Like, this is the time. And so we were both all in, and that was the deciding point that spring of 2020. And we jumped, July 1st of 2020 to start this thing, and kind of the rest just slowly snowballed, over that. Was that more than you wanted or two?
I don't, well,
That was
actually, I didn't
great.
think it was slowly. I don't think it's a slow snowball. I think that there's like, yes, I'm sure as you've lived it, that
Yeah.
slow snowball from the outside, it was, holy crap, what is this thing? This thing's on fire. And like, you guys have found a way to capture and lift up things that happen all around this incredible sector that
Mm,
otherwise were not being captured and not being lifted up. And I
thank you.
think it's tied to, like you said, some of those very specific, very intentional values that remove some of the bias that in other cases they get in the way of that sort of ripple effect that y'all have created. So not
Thank
only
you.
is this like our 100th episode, but something that's also special for you and for Becky, and you have no idea what I'm about to say, and that gives me great joy to get to tease this out for a second. Is that this episode, as people are listening to this will be on July 11th. This will be live, and so we're recording this a week and a half ish prior to July 11th, which is an important moment in We're for Good history. And
Thank you,
it's an
friends.
important moment in terms of our partnership as this goes live and folks are enjoying and celebrating and reveling in the Impact Uprising. And so, just like how has this idea of Impact Uprising, it feels like there's been consternation that has built towards this, and
Mm,
now it's an overflow and a tipping out in a very good way
mm,
of July 11th and what's happening. But tied together for folks,
mm.
the launch of a podcast that has become very successful is one thing, but then to turn that into something different that's happening starting with July 11th is that's an altogether different feat. And so, like, tie those things together for us.
Friends, I'm overcome. Like, I'm big in signs, and so like the fact that y'all are dropping your 100th episode on that day like means the world, man. Thank y'all. What a gift. Yeah, like, let me try to unpack that. So, I mean, our vision, I go back to like I wrote a 30-page geeky business plan that didn't know anything at the time. Like, you think you know how things are going to go and things don't go how they go. But our vision was an impact uprising. And I just love the idea that it meant at the time of our start was that, we believe in the transformational power of philanthropy, of what it does to the people that are giving, not even just the impact. The impact's always talked about. It's one of our values. You should steward relentlessly. You should talk about impact. But I think the impact uprising is like, man, the world feels broken. A lot of people feel disconnected. They don't feel like they've got authentic relationships around them in a lot of spaces. And there's so many systemic issues. Like, you can get like in this cycle, especially like in a lot of the media cycles of just like, but we were really captivated of like an impact uprising to us is like more people that could get connected to philanthropy through their own personal life. That could be balm for this world. And I was like, that's kind of what drives us. So, our theory of change is like we could equip nonprofit fundraisers to be better at that, to build better movements, to build stronger movements, to take care of ourselves so it trickles to our families and all those things. And so that was Impact Uprising. But I think, we were definitely thinking about the nonprofit space. And I will say, when I started, everything in our documentation is like nonprofit leaders is our avatar, and nonprofit young leaders is our small avatar or whatever. We were definitely thinking about one sector. And your question about 500 conversations, how does it change you? And what's moved me is that I don't know if it's ego or if it was what of spending my career in nonprofit. It's like the nonprofit sector can't change the world by itself. Like it's 10% of the US population at most, right? Like it was never about just the nonprofit sector. It's about how do we get everybody together, that everybody has something to offer. Wasn't even planning to thread that together, but like everybody has something to bring, and money is often a lower common denominator of what some people could bring that feel like they have nothing. Sometimes it's a huge factor, that helps things rise. But Impact Uprising, as we went along, realized we were dreaming really small. We were like thinking, revolutionize the nonprofit sector, how you change the world. And I'm like, yeah, that's my passion. I love that. I love the space. I love the people of this space. It's like the greatest. But man, like, what would it look like to lock arms with businesses that have that same idea? And what does it look like to lock arms with the random, what Becky calls the knitting circles, the people that are just trying to do change. I meet people on the road all the time that are like, I was at Chase Bank the other day, and this banker, I have to just tell this because it's just so funny to me. I'm like having to sign a form because we're trying to do this thing and I'm trying to sign this form. And he's like, what exactly do you do? And I was like, I tried to explain I mean, not like long like this, right? Like the 30-second of what I do. And he's like, I just want to do good like that. Like anything I can do, like to help you. I just don't really know where even to plug in. I was like, I know so many people that would love to help you, like figure that out and all this thing. And I was like, so let's stay in touch. And he's like, well, I'm not supposed to build relationships. And I was like, this is so counter to my world right now. It's like, let me find you. I'm going to find you on LinkedIn and we're going to get you hooked up. Okay. But you don't have to do anything. You can cut this out if that is not appropriate. But I think I meet people on the road that so many people are inclined, they want to do good. And like that's so counter to what I think the media or whatever forces out there make us think. But most people are bent to like want to care for their family, their community, take care of their people at a minimum, and then the greater good too. And it's like Impact Uprising is available for all. So let me step you back into like Weird for Good. How are we transforming along the way? There was a definitive day, Weird for Good started in my house. Like Julie and Becky would drive over to our house. Like we'd have lunch at the table with my family and we would move into the office and record and then we'd like talk about this stuff. And I remember one day we're sitting in the back office talking and I was like, I realize this shift is happening, that Impact Uprising is beyond nonprofit, but I'm not going to lie. It scares me, y'all, because I think feel like I know the nonprofit space, but I don't know like how big this thing could be. And Becky's that type of personality that just like go for it, which is good to pair with somebody like me that's a little more can have the dream, but I need my co-person to like kind of push me over a little bit. But she's like, I totally see it. I totally see that there's a place for this, and the community around us helped us believe in it too. And so as we started to like organize and things started to grow, community is not only like a value for us, it's like our DNA. So like we wanted to not just create a podcast, but like create a way for people to connect. So we've had the growing Weird for Good community that just kind of like was around, and they would help us figure out what the content may be. We just get together on Zoom on Fridays to just like talk about life and like get to know each other. And it's like over time, like the snowball that happened is like, not only did we meet a lot of people through the podcast, but we met a lot of people in the community. And when you really listen to somebody and you make people feel seen and celebrated, then I think there's like a just different level of connection that people just want to pour in and be part of this thing. And so as we started to figure out what is our unique thing that we can bring to the world, we didn't want to add just like another event to the docket. And I think this one, when we were bringing you guys in and saying, we want to find, our partners in this that believe in the same thing. And y'all been doing that with Shift, which I love so much. And I'm so sad that I'm not able to be in person for y'all's Shift, because it's like the same idea of like, we don't want to just keep talking. We want to figure out how do we actually shift things for good. And I think conversation is a great place to start, but it's like, we got to move beyond that. And I was about to take off on my road trip, and I'm not going to lie, like it's like the universal connection of all this stuff is that I knew this was going to open me up to go through cities and like get to meet people on the road too, that I've never gotten to meet with. And so as that's happening, Impact Up is coming into focus to say, what if we did, what Weird for Good is really become known for is like convening people around content and conversations. But now we've got friends in every corner of the US. What would it look like to gather locally? And, I started socializing that with a couple of stops on the way of this road trip. And everybody I shared it with was like, you have to do this. Like, we're totally all in. So, once we started, sharing that vision, people just kept turning on lights of different cities. And it's like the dream of doing this in 15 cities got blasted by. And it's now in more than 25 cities in the US, and we're 5 international locations. And there's going to be more than 80 people in Uganda gathering for Impact Up on July 11th. And there's maxed out venues in multiple of the cities. And there's people that I haven't even met, that are leading cities that just feel like they're part of this thing. And it's like, so the ripple has grown. And I think it's because this community is around values, and it's around shared belief of what's possible, and honestly like hope. And it's not like a negative place, it's an uplifting place that we're all needed. So that's a little bit behind it. And we're just kind of trying to we don't want to keep our arms around it because we don't want to keep it small, but we want to like fan
Right.
it, and like just really try to be grateful for this moment and grateful for everybody that's pouring in. It's taking me aback, honestly.
Y'all are doing something that's special, and we're honored to get to be a part of it. Um,
When y'all said
and so,
yes, I mean, it put so much wind and belief in our sails, because y'all were the first yes to us. So I want to thank you for that. To
oh,
say we
you're
see it, we're all in. Like it changes the game when you have people that believe in you, and so thank you for seeing it, and for seeing it for such a long time. Like, thank you.
it, yeah. I mean, yes, it's
All right.
yes, but it's an important yes, right? I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, and just I had a little tiny micro interruption here
Oh
around
no.
here because as I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, and I get this little micro interruption of a 13-year
What's
old,
up?
Hi.
and
How's it going?
and
Good. How are you?
and I handed her headphones so that she could hear what you were talking about, John.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
and so like Ziggy is like standing here like, what am I getting into? Like, probably terrified that she's going to ultimately be on YouTube. And so
Oh,
here's the no, you can't leave yet. You can't leave yet because here's the thing that I want to ask you kind of in closing,
Okay.
um, John, because I do see this other through line that I think is super important, and I want you to wrestle with it. As you talked about the formative parts of your career at Oklahoma State and the choice to leave and to go for a year to Thailand. And as you talk about the work that you and Becky did around an employee giving program, and then as you talk about the launch of We Are for Good, and then as you talk about the Impact Uprising, there is this through line that I see and that Ronnie and I see of how values create impact. And so just you say it and you fly past it a lot of times because you're so used to saying it. But I
Okay.
just want you to wrestle with for a second, with us out loud how what how you think about what you put value in and why that matters in the work that you do.
I mean, what a beautiful question. And again, you're getting me fresh off of the Lantern retreat, which is all
Yeah, which
about,
by the way, we're going to just make sure that everyone's gone to Lantern prior to having a conversation with us from now on.
yeah, do it. Because a couple things that I guess come to mind as I'm like kind of wrestling through this. And tell me if I don't answer your question in the process of talking about this. But I think what I talked about, that everybody has something deeply of value to add to this world. And after spending a week focused on ourselves, which was really antithetical to all of us kind of on our team to like step away and like, let's focus on ourselves. That one of the moments that moved me to tears, and I'm not usually a crier, and we see here so many like really things that are cry worthy, but something that really moved me at the retreat was that, we get really clear on what's your purpose. And it's not something you want to aspire to do, but you do want to aspire to be it. But there's this realization that the purpose that's written within you, what they call your light, some others may call it your soul or something like that. But the light within you you already are that. It may just be being dimmed right now, but
Hmm.
it's already there. And for me, like, as I like get really clear of what I love and want to do in this world is like, I want to encourage people to like understand their value and to understand their like superpowers and like use that to impact the world. And I was standing there realizing I keep thinking like you want to like be something in the future and you realize, wait, no, what if I'm already that? Like, this is what I already do. And there is so much to be unlocked if we just realize each of us have something really unique to bring to the world. It's like, how do we get in touch with that and try to spend as much of our like time and energy and effort, because we have one life, not just our work, not just our play and family and all this. It's like, how do we center all of that in that? And so for me, it's like, man, I need to use that gift to be like encouraging my family and to calling out when I see the beauty in what, I talked about Viv, like her love of people and love of generosity and her ability to just like give so freely. But I see it in y'all in the way that you have vision and you like care for people and create space for these conversations. Like, how do we help people find that and feel connected to that, because it's so needed in like creating the impact of the world. So as I think about like the building blocks of like using value coming together around that, it's like, it's about community. It's about like surrounding ourselves with people that want to help us live in our most vibrant state. And I think that's so important. But like, don't dim your light. Don't think that you don't have something really vital to offer, because you just really, really, really do.
Okay, so from now on, anytime I need my 13-year-old to hear something, I'm calling John.
she, it's in you, man. Like you, I feel like you do this to me. And hey, can I say this in front of your daughter?
Yeah, sure. So
Justin's
you
one of the
can, yeah.
most like intentional humans that I know. Like, I received one
Oh,
book for Christmas this past year, and it's from your dad. And that book, like in the time that I received it, was so what I needed in life. And it was met with like, Justin knows a gazillion people and he's like in community with a gazillion people, but he took the time to write me a personal note and to make me feel seen and to be still and to lean into the stillness. And it's like, that's just what I needed for that season of my life. So
Hmm.
your dad's incredibly intentional and is impacting so many people beyond this mic. So sorry he brought you on YouTube to tell you that, but he's awesome.
okay.
I love it. You're letting me step
John,
into my gift. I want to encourage you.
we can't wait to see what happens on July 11th, man. We can't wait to see what happens on July 12th and the 13th, and like
Thanks,
just
man.
the way that values play out in the work that you're doing, like that light is awesome, and we love it. We love every bit of it. And so thank you for helping us celebrate this milestone for us, and for the work that you and Becky and Julie and Abby and the team continues to do. It's awesome. It's so cool.
Dude, so much gratitude. Ronnie, think the world of both you guys. Thank you for having me on this special episode too. Y'all gotta have me back so I can interview y'all about your 100 episodes. I want to do that. So let's turn the tables. Happy to come
We'll turn
back
the
anytime.
tables.
There
Okay,
you go.
let's do it. Grateful, y'all. Thank you.